Ironically, my first viewing of the Kenobi series on Disney Plus was an overwhelmingly positive experience, but for reasons that had nothing to do with the series. A friend of the household who had already seen it was eager to get my opinion on it, so we had her over for a watch party and binged our way through the first 3 episodes, while a playlist of my videos played in the background on the other television, and we had frequent pauses where I read passages from the Dark Lord trilogy out loud. It was that kind of evening. This will be a bizarre review, in that it will be focused largely on how the series depicts Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, specifically the lightsaber duel that capped out the 3rd episode, and will be structured like one of my Versus videos. As for my general opinion on the series as a whole, on the plus side, I like the production design, Ewan McGregor is bringing his A-game, and knowing that it's actually Hayden Christenson inside the armor definitely gives Vader a different feel. But on the other hand, the Inquisitor Reva, much like Ahsoka Tano in TCW, is a superfluous third wheel crowbarred into a storyline that should be focused on Kenobi and Skywalker, while lacking the charisma or likability that made Ahsoka accepted and popular despite that. On a similar note, I view the inclusion of Princess Leia as being analogous to the multiple confrontations between Kenobi and General Grievous in TCW. Even though the context of their dialogues in episodes 4 and 6 respectively make quite clear that these characters have never met, it's never explicitly stated, which is all the excuse Dave Filoni needs to force them together. For my part, I see Filoni's fingerprints all over this production, and find that it is ultimately structured like TCW. Rushed and contrived plots intended to set up for fan service encounters and visuals. For anyone who wants my opinion on the apparent internal civil war within Lucasfilm, I think it's all kabuki theater, a mock conflict between colluding factions analogous to the Clone Wars itself. So from the top, where were Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader physically within the 9 BBY time frame? Well, Vader was Vader, a burn victim and quadruple amputee kept alive by cybernetic life support, his prosthetic limbs and heavy armor making him one of the strongest and most durable combatants of his era despite his precarious state. Basic movement requires that he channel the dark side constantly, but fire is no deterrent to the Dark Lord. As for Kenobi, the series gets right that he's a relatively spry 48-year-old, but that he's still aging out. What the series gets wrong is his lifestyle. Ben Kenobi wasn't a menial laborer who buried his lightsaber. He was a self-sufficient hermit who stayed on top of his exercises. But as in the series, Vader's physical dominance over him is unquestionable. For this reason, Kenobi is right to run against Vader, provided that he's simply using hit-and-run tactics, not the blatant cowardice on display in the Kenobi series. What's depicted on screen is a broken man resigned to his duty, and unwilling to take any direct action without someone twisting his arm, and whose character arc basically boils down to him rediscovering his sense of purpose, but in defense of the other twin. The original depiction of old Ben Kenobi's tenure as Luke Skywalker's protector in the expanded universe presented a Jedi Guardian reinventing himself as a Jedi Consular in response to both his advancing age and the lack of serious external opposition necessary to keep himself on his toes as a duelist. Other than his single lightsaber duel against Asharad Het, Kenobi only involved himself in local conflicts with the Tusken Raiders and Oren Galt's gang, otherwise keeping a low profile, his formidable skill maintained solely by his exercises. and in contrast to the on-screen Kenobi, who turns away fellow Jedi fugitives while denying his identity, Kenobi's one excursion off of Tatooine in Legends was to assist his fellow Jedi fugitive, Ferrus Olin, whom he subsequently hosted as a house guest. As for Vader, I noticed that the series depicted Vader's conduct similarly to Scene 38 reimagined, with Vader fighting more aggressively and showing off his more dynamic range of techniques. Oddly enough, I have no problem with Vader's more unrestrained and sadistic temperament in this fight, especially given that he's only had 10 years to get over Mustafar rather than 20. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, Darth Vader had developed into a cagey defensive fighter, relying on psychological warfare and environmental combat tactics to wear down and box in his adversaries, only assuming an offensive stance at the 11th hour, ironically conducting himself much like Obi-Wan Kenobi in his prime. But as depicted in stories such as The Rise of Darth Vader or the Purge anthology, Vader did not master his rage overnight, and was forced to endure several major defeats and setbacks before he learned to keep a cool head. And even then, he was still occasionally prone to arrogance. Despite everything, new canon has actually been extremely kind to Vader, depicting a physical powerhouse who consistently dominates his opponents and drives the action. With all that being said, the series still overplays Vader's dominance over Kenobi. Old Ben isn't that old yet and wouldn't be that far gone after only 10 years, while Vader is still 10 years away from his own height of power during the Galactic Civil War. I will concede that the series jumps through all the necessary hoops to justify Vader telekinetically ragdolling Kenobi by turning Obi into a weak, fearful man whom Vader effortlessly intimidates. Apparently being Luke Skywalker's stalwart protector was not enough to keep Kenobi on his game, and he needed Leia to reawaken his powers. If anything, the literary version of Kenobi became steadily more powerful during his exile, meditating on the light side to become a Force spirit and relying on his enhanced perceptions and Force attunement to guide his decisions. By the time of Episode 4, he was constantly using subtle applications of power to navigate situations and distract potential enemies, operating as a light side Darth Traya. Not to overstate Kenobi's power, but I think there was a reason for why Vader never attempted any telekinetic attacks on board the Death Star. Though that's not to say that Vader's telekinesis wouldn't come up at all. He was beating people down with thrown objects as early as Kashyyyk. As I already said, I will concede that the series jumps through all of the necessary hoops to justify Kenobi's weak performance within the context of the narrative, but I seriously disagree with the narrative. Why would Obi-Wan Kenobi continue to serve as Luke Skywalker's watchdog if he had truly fallen so far off the wagon that he required an encounter with Leia to rediscover his sense of purpose and reawaken his powers, since that would mean that he was no longer capable of serving as an effective Jedi trainer. Secondly, why would a menial laborer who is still part of society be ignorant of the continued existence of Darth Vader? Kenobi did learn Anakin Skywalker's Sith name before confronting him on Mustafar, and Vader was a central figure in Imperial propaganda. What everyone forgets is that old Ben Kenobi did grapple with personal issues after what happened to Anakin, and never truly forgave Anakin until he was literally on the ground dying. And despite his own baggage and the need to keep a low profile, Kenobi was never inactive. A loose adaptation of the Desperate Mission and Dark Warning entries from The Last of the Jedi YA series, supported by the internal monologues from The Life and Legend of Obi and the J.J. Miller Kenobi novel, would have created a storyline that hit all the same beats, while also being more respectful to the characters and the setting. Reva is a superfluous third wheel in what should be a Kenobi Skywalker storyline. Making this a Kenobi Skywalker storyline undercuts their final confrontation in Episode 4, and including Leia contradicts the films and raises all sorts of questions. As to the question that I made this video to address, how would Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader actually stack up against each other within the time frame of 9 years before the Battle of Yavin? Well, it would be the same balance of advantages and deficiencies on both ends as in their penultimate confrontation the year of, but the actual gap between them would be a lot smaller. Kenobi's physical capabilities and lightsaber skills wouldn't be nearly so far gone after only 10 years, and he was still quite formidable at the end. Vader isn't quite so cold and disciplined as he will be down the road, and he is still recovering his strength in the Force after Mustafar. Where Vader is still 10 years away from his actual height of power, my firm contention is that Kenobi's power has been growing steadily since Revenge of the Sith. Do I actually think that he is equal to or greater than Darth Vader at this point? No. But is he close enough to pose a serious threat to Darth Vader at this point? Yes. Though it would still be the same grinding war of attrition as their actual final fight, a battle between Vader and Obi-Wan at this point would be more dynamic and drawn out, resembling Vader's duels with Rowan Shrine on Kashyyyk or Luke Skywalker on Bespin. Vader would not be able to achieve the clinical dissection he performed on board the Death Star. He would be forced to go all out, and you would not get the embarrassing curb stomp on display in the third episode of Kenobi. As of this recording, the final episode is not dropped yet, but from all indications, it looks like the rematch will be much stronger. But at the end of the day, neither of these fights should have happened.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.